Righto, up early this morning. Just going to head in here, spin a couple of yarns about looking after critters. Here we go. Who would have thought?
Person to spend a significant portion of their time caring for wildlife, especially for someone who used to hunt animals. Today, Josh Neal is an authorised wildlife carer using his property in Victoria's Gippsland region as a rescue and rehabilitation sanctuary. He's also amassed a huge following on social media, inspiring others to create change in their lives. And Josh Neal is my guest today on Changing Australia. G'day, Josh. Welcome.
Good morning, Sally. How you going, legend?
Very well, thank you. Josh, what changed for you? You used to hunt and you're now a wildlife carer. What's going on here?
It's been a bit of a funny journey for me. I think maybe that's why I resonate so well with the Australian community. I know we've got a big farming background. It's sort of what our country's been built on, wasn't it? It's that farming, hard work and country lifestyle when we developed it. And I think what led me here was because you're only a product of your predecessors, right? So I grew up in a farm and timber working town of Hayfield to Namba, that Gippsland area. And when I was growing up, I had this perception of the animals that occupied the land. And the farmers are very compassionate people, don't get me wrong like that. But when you're managing things like kangaroos and wombats in our area, you got to understand that when you're a farmer, I think a kangaroo eats as much 7 kangaroos to 1 cow. So if you have a mob of 200 kangaroos on your property and that's a lot of extra cattle you could be running, that's a lot of food off your table for your kids and, it's your lifestyle. And especially with the wombats, you might spend $100,000 building a big dam and water is your life source out here on dry country. And if one of them happens to, dig a hole through the back of the dam and you lose all your water and you ruin your dam, you can become quite frustrated. So I can see the need to manage these animals, and that's what I grew up doing. I grew up out there with the farmers, shooting kangaroos, shooting wombats, and I didn't have anybody to watch videos like I make on social media or to grow my own perception on these animals and how unique they are. And I guess once you get educated on something, that builds compassion, and then with that comes empathy. And I think that if I had more of a chance to have these avenues when I was growing up, maybe I would have a bit of a different outlook. And then after that, I sort of got into deer hunting. So what people don't understand with the deer hunting, it's different to pest management. It's not all guns blazing and crazy business. It's sort of you sit somewhere for a period of time and it's a lot of sitting, watching, looking and observing. And when I was doing this, I seemed to come under this understanding that when I was waiting for the deer, I'd see these little wombats walk out of their holes and they'd be rolling down the hills and playing with each other. And that's what gave me that empathy. I'm like, geez, they're actually real characters, these little fellas. They got some quite unique attributes, and maybe they're not as bad as what I thought, because all I used to hear was, shoot that bugger before it gets down the hole, would you? That's the only perception I got of wombats, and you didn't get to see them interact as they normally do, because they're obviously a nocturnal species and they're very secretive and they live on their own. And then that was much the same with the kangaroos. You'd sit there and watch them all come in a big family mob and their little infrastructure or their hierarchy that they had, and their little joeys bouncing around. And I don't know, I think that sort of led me into, because I'd always interacted with animals on the land. My mum grew up in a little farming district, and part of their curriculum before the Wildlife Act was, instead of taking like a baby home from primary school like kids do these days and take care of a fake baby, they used to actually take home joey wombats, joey kangaroos from the old wildlife shelter down the road from their little school and take them home and look after them for, 2 or 3 days as part of their curriculum. So that was always instilled in me to look after animals. And then after the hunting and come the compassion. And then I started, branching out when I started my own job career and got some money behind me and brought my own property and then started setting it up to rear these little animals. And now I look back at it and, I'm trying to inspire a bit of change and work with these landholders and farmers just to have a little bit different opinion on these critters.
When your thoughts first started to shift on some of these issues, Josh, what was the reaction from some of your friends and neighbours when you started talking about some of these ideas of looking after animals?
Yeah, They're actually pretty accepting. As I said, it's a common misconception that a lot of the farmers and that out there don't care about the animals and that. They just sometimes don't understand as much, as I said, because they haven't been exposed to this different style. And don't get me wrong, I think I approach it with a very common sense approach. Like I'm a very green person. Obviously, anyone that knows me or follow me, I do so much for wildlife. I'm rearing these animals now, putting so much time, effort and money into getting them back into the bush. So I don't want to get upset with the farmers that have these other views. I'd rather work with them. So things like I've gone to my friends now and said, like, how we used to shoot the kangaroos back in the day. I still don't have a problem with that where the research is, but I just think of how many times that we unethically did it. Like you would shoot a kangaroo and keep driving on. And now I think that most of those kangaroos we shot that were females would have normally had a joey in their pouch, or, maybe we didn't go and check on them and they were wounded instead of dead. And like, it's pretty hurtful for me to be able to sort of admit to that to back in the day. But when you don't know any better and you just think that that's the standard and that's acceptable, that's what you believe in. You don't think you're doing anything wrong. I never did anything horrendous to animals. I never had like a bad background in that space. But I look back at that now and think, geez, that probably wasn't the best thing. So going and approaching those farmers and having these conversations, it's like, what I've learnt, guys? Remember how we used to go out and cull the kangaroos and we'd shoot the big ones first? And because they're the easiest to shoot, and everyone wanted to shoot the biggest kangaroo. And now I look back at that. When you shoot your big males in a mob, those 3 or 4 big males you might have in your mob, what they do is when the younger males come in to encroach on your farm, because the females are there, you got to get in and get as many girls as you can. But the big males would stand up and go, well, not today, young son. You're out of here. Go and find your own mob. So they would shoot the big male kangaroos, and then the next week they would wonder why they had 15 more kangaroos on the property. That's because there was no one there to hold out these big. The big males weren't there to hold out all the young fellas coming in to encroach on the mob, and it would actually increase your number of kangaroos. So things like this now, you have these conversations, and then because you become relatable and approachable, they actually want to listen to you instead of if you walked up and said, "You're a farmer, you're murdering all the kangaroos, how dare you?" Well, that creates that division, doesn't it, and that tension. So I think I've been accepted fairly well, especially with a lot of my friends, and now they want to ring me up and go, "Well, there's Wombat down the back of the shed. How do you reckon we get him out? Because the bugger's digging under the shed. Don't want to kill him if we don't have to." So that's a sort of a big win for me in this space.
Josh, you've now got a big following online. You've got 1.5 million followers on Instagram alone. What's the message you're trying to communicate, and what do you know about the profile of your listeners? Are they here in Australia or are they elsewhere?
I've got about 50-50 split, massive in America, because you've got to understand that our wildlife is super unique, and because we deal with it on day-to-day basis, especially if you're out there in the farmland, you'll just drive past a kangaroo and go, "Oh, bloody kangaroo," or a wombat. But until you step out of that space and you start to see just how unique and lucky we are to have these animals here. I've grown a big following overseas, so Americans love us Aussies, mainly because of the accent and the cute critters, and the same in the UK. They don't have as much unique wildlife over there. They're a lot more used to like cows and domesticated sort of critters. And about another 50% of the following is right here in Australia. So yeah, I've got a bit of a spread.
Ashley, your daughter has been helping to care for some of the animals. There has been some criticism levelled online about that. How have you approached that, Josh?
Oh, you know what it's like? I guess there's no rule book on being a parent, is there? It's acceptable risk. Those people don't live in my shoes. I've been around these animals for a long time. Let's put it in perspective. I get a lot of criticism. I'm a big believer I'm trying to change the perception of snakes, right? They have a similar thing. Like when you grew up as a kid, maybe 60 years ago, your parents had to put the absolute fear of God in you about snakes because there was no anti-venin. And if you were trying to look after your kid, because that's what you know, as a parent is your primary concern, isn't it? Your health and well-being of your kid. So if they were going down the back paddock, you would say, if you see a snake, you're going to die if you go near it. So you had to instill that absolute fear in them to keep them safe. And I think that generational trauma stepped through, and now, even with more education and that, still a lot of those people are absolutely terrified of snakes. So with that, when like I have Ashley handling pythons and snakes like that, some people just can't fathom that I would even put my child in this position. But in my perception, if you had like a daughter with a python, I'd rather her get bitten by a python than being mauled by my family dog, if you know what I mean. There's risk tolerance there based on an animal. So let's say you have a staffy, it's a nice family dog. One day it just flips out and decides to attack your child. I'd much rather the repercussions of a snake, like a python bite naturally, than her to be mauled by like a family dog. So it's mainly just risk tolerance, and that's up to me, I think, and managing that. And I don't do anything too silly that I don't think most people in the country wouldn't do with their kids. But yeah, a lot of people looking in other situations, like maybe city people, they just can't understand that because they're so scared of wild animals and not knowing the traits and not being educated enough to read the signs and that sort of thing. They can't understand why I'd put my child in that position. But yeah, that's just my opinion, and I think she's going all right. She's having a ball.
Josh, just finally, what have you learnt from this journey that you've made from hunter to wildlife carer?
I think that you've got to not worry about what other people think, and you've got to really take the time to generate your own opinion. So whatever you're taught, as I said, you're only a product of your predecessors, but just take the time to sit down, analyse a lot of the stuff yourself, and don't be scared to form your own opinions and drive that bit of change. It's so easy now with so much technology at our fingertips. Like I said, I wish when I was growing up I had someone like myself that I could have watched all the cute little wombat videos running in and out and rolling on their backs and being playful like little bush puppies, and maybe I wouldn't have shot as many as I did when I was a kid because I didn't have that education or empathy. So just trying to drive that change and just trying to shift that into people, and that's my advice for up-and-coming people in this space. Find something you're compassionate at, really enjoy it, and then drive a bit of change where you can for the positive. Just the Australian outlook, isn't it?
It sure is. Josh, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks for making some time. I appreciate it.
No worries, legend. I better get home and feed some of these wombats. I just come off night shift, so sorry if I wasn't as quick-witted as I normally am. Always a pleasure with these guys. Maybe I should have done that for a living instead of being a sparky. Easier to spin yarns, I reckon, than do night shifts.